Today we bring you the full inside story of a political resignation that has shaken the heart of India's constitutional system. Now Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar has stepped down and his exit is not just shocking, it's historic. A resignation rooted in deep distrust, constitutional ambiguity and a showdown with the government he once stood beside. Now viewers, this isn't just about one man stepping aside. It is about how a controversial impeachment motion, sharp legal interpretation and growing political friction led to a dramatic midnight resignation. Let's start at the core of this controversy. Now the motion to remove Justice Verma, a sitting High Court judge. The opposition submitted a notice of motion for his removal. This was under Article 217(1)(b) and Article 124(4) of the Constitution along with Section 3(1)(b) of the Judges Inquiry Act 1968. Now this very motion was signed by about 63 opposition Rajya Sabha MPs. It was taken up and read aloud by none other than Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar. And this was in his Rajya Sabha capacity as the chairperson of the second house. But the single act triggered a massive constitutional and political backlash for the leader himself.
That I have received notice of motion under Article 217(1)(b) read with Article 218 and Article 124, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution of India, along with Section 3(1)(b) of the Judges Inquiry Act 1968, to constitute a statutory committee for removal of Justice Verma, Judge of the High Court of Judicature at Rajasthan, at Allahabad. This has been received by me today. It is signed by more than 50 members of the Council of States, and thus it meets the numerical requirement of signing by members of Parliament for setting in motion a process for removal of a High Court judge.
Now viewers, this acceptance of motion is exactly what triggered a massive and constitutional political backlash. And here's where legal technicalities come in because they matter. Now under the Judges Inquiry Act, a judge's removal motion must be submitted by at least 100 Lok Sabha MPs or 50 Rajya Sabha MPs. But submitting the motion isn't enough. The presiding officer of that house must admit the motion for it to move forward. And only then can a 3-member inquiry committee be formed comprising about 2 judges and 1 jurist, and this is to examine the charges against the judge. Now here's a twist. The Act says that if motions are submitted in both the houses, which is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, on the same day, then no committee can be set up unless both houses admit that very motion. So when Dhankar publicly declared in the Rajya Sabha that the Rajya Sabha motion meets the numerical requirement, the government at this point was stunned because at the same time, the Union Law Minister Arjun Ram Meghwal had confirmed that over 100 MPs in the Lok Sabha had already submitted a separate motion on the same thing. Now, whether Dhankar had merely acknowledged submission or actually admitted the motion became the constitutional flashpoint in this crisis. And from the government's point of view, Dhankar had jumped the gun. Sources say the centre wanted the Lok Sabha to actually take up the motion first. That would have left Dhankar, the chief of Rajya Sabha at that point, without any role in selecting the 3-member judicial panel, which is essentially the next step. And by moving first in the Rajya Sabha, Dhankar ensured that upper house got a say. Now to the government, it felt like a deliberate political maneuver, one that favoured the opposition strategy at this point. And this wasn't the only point of contention, viewers. Sources say that Dhankar had stopped sharing key decisions with the centre. He began ignoring inputs from senior ministers and even criticised members of the cabinet, a rare break in protocol for someone holding a constitutional post. Now we're being told that the Prime Minister specifically was not pleased about this. Meanwhile, the government quietly began mobilizing an even broader, bolder move. And this is a no-confidence motion against Dhankar himself. NDA MPs were contacted and told that signing was optional, and those who signed were grouped and secretly briefed by senior ministers on the rare and very sensitive process of moving a no-confidence motion against the sitting Vice President. Now, the plan here was, viewers, to table it at the very next day in the Lok Sabha, but Dhankar got the wind of government's plan, and in a very dramatic midnight move, he rushed to the Rashtrapati Bhavan without informing the government, and after waiting for just about 25 minutes, he met President Draupadi Murmu and handed over his resignation letter. Now, high-stakes political confrontation was suddenly over. No debate, no vote, just a quiet and seismic exit. Now, Jagdeep Dhankar's resignation isn't just about internal dissent. It's about how constitutional procedures can be weaponized in political power struggles. Now, viewers, sources reveal that the government is all set to bring a no-confidence motion against Justice Verma in Lok Sabha. A high-level meeting attended by Home Minister Amit Shah, Speaker Om Birla and Deputy Chairman Harivansh found that the notice read out by Dhankar in the Rajya Sabha was technically flawed. Now, withdrawal or correction options were explored, and as of now, the Vice President's post lies vacant, but the ripples of this crisis are far from over. So, the crucial question at this point to ask, what's next? Well, a formal election must be held within 60 days to fill up the vacant post of Vice President. But beyond procedure, this resignation leaves behind serious questions here about the institutional checks, political overreach, and also the fragility of balance between constitutional office and the executive here. Several questions being left behind by this sudden and shocking resignation by the Vice President. Now, crucial story coming to light, which we've been discussing with you, and now we finally have a few answers as to why this resignation came in at this point. Clearly, there has been a tussle going on between the Vice President and the centre. There were several issues involved, but the trigger point here was the acceptance of motion against Justice Verma by opposition in Rajya Sabha. This is something that essentially triggered the crisis between the centre and the Vice President, Jagdeep Dhankhar. Now, according to reports, there were plans to bring a no-confidence motion against Vice President himself, but he jumped the gun. He went straight to the President, submitted his resignation, and ended what could have been a full-blown crisis. Now, this resignation certainly leaves us with several questions about institutional checks, political overreach, and also the fragility of balance at this point between constitutional office and the executive. Where is the balance? Who has an overreach here? These are the questions that will need to be discussed.